Y'all said red. Bam, bam. Y'all said red. Bam, bam. Close up, close up, close up, close up, close up.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of The Close Up. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, a part of the Orlando Magic HQ network. Today is going to be a fun show. It's just me, no guest this week. I just got back from traveling just a few hours ago, but I still wanted to rock out an episode for you all this week. Today we are going to be focusing on the last bit of the year. There's 23 games left for the Orlando Magic, and we're going to get deep into that schedule and kind of see what's really going to happen, what this squad has coming up to end the season with their playoff push and rankings and kind of all that stuff. We'll talk a little bit about Jalen Suggs, Paulo, things like that as well. And I'm just really looking forward to this end of the season, kind of what the rest of the regular season looks like. There's still some questions to be learned this year about this team, kind of where Apollo and Franz and the rest of this crew can do. Will the role players get a little bit more consistent offensively with their shooting? Will coach figure out some things to unlock their offense so it can be a little bit more efficient? Their defense is still outstanding. We're going to get into a lot of stuff. But before we get into that, of course, we got to do the housekeeping things, right? I want to remind you all of our Patreon program that we got going on. The links in description. All the support that you all give to us in that program is really helpful to allow us to keep doing these things, putting out content for you, our podcasts, our YouTube shows. We have post-game live audio spaces, things like that. We also have giveaways that we do. We're about to launch a new giveaway just for the Patreon program. So if you haven't signed up for that, make sure you sign up for that now, or at least check it out and see if it's something you'd like to consider. Remember, after every game, as I mentioned earlier, we do post-game live spaces on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it still. Our boys Stanley, Bryce, Skinny, they host those after every single game. They're phenomenal. It's a great spot for the fans to interact and kind of get their thoughts off on the game that was just played. And then we also have coverage of every single game. There's an article or some form of video recap of every game. So make sure you follow us on our website at orlandomagichq.com. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't also be able to do this. And our first sponsor is the one that's been rocking with us for a while, is BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selections of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-point to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Believe Podcast Network is someone that we are affiliated with. They help us get people like that to support us. Another big shout out I want to give is our good friend, Brandon Kravitz. He's awesome. We have just a really good relationship and partnership with him. And I want to shout out his new stuff. Magic fans, listen up. Orlando Magic Radio Network pregame and postgame host Brandon Kravitz is live daily on 96.9 The Game within the zone starting at 3:30 p.m. On Magic game days. He stretches that show all the way to 6:30, with the final 30 minutes being completely focused on the Magic. Want more bonus content? Check out his Zone Heads podcast for weekly on-demand episodes. Thank you, Brandon Kravitz. Thank you to our sponsors. We're psyched to have you all. Let's get into the show a little bit now, all right? This is going to be a little bit of a shorter show today, but I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys and kind of just seeing what I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys and kind of just like letting you know my thoughts on kind of what we're seeing with this Magic, or what we could see with this Magic team the rest of the year. I'm going to do some screen sharing. So if you haven't already, if you're not watching this on YouTube, I highly recommend switching over to that so you can see what I'm looking at. If not, that's okay, because I'll explain it as best as I can through the audio platform. Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. Hit that like button, give us a thumbs up. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. It's super helpful for us. All right, so let's get into it, all right? Let's just do a quick standings update real quick. So looking at the standings right now, I'm recording this Monday, February 24th. in the evening. There's a few games still being played, mostly West Coast games at this point. But the Magic are sitting in the 7th seed. All right. They are 29 and 30. They're one game below 500. They're sitting behind Detroit in 6th place. The Detroit Pistons, they've had a great season so far. They're above 500. They're 32 and 26. So there's a bit of a gap that needs to be made up there if the Magic want to creep in on the standings and kind of get out of this 7th, 8th race that they've been in with the Atlanta Hawks. The Pacers are just above the Pistons, 32 wins, 24 losses. They've played less games than the Magic. The Magic have played a ton of games. Most teams have closer to 25, 26 games left. The Magic have 23. So they've played a lot more than most other teams. They're definitely not going to catch the upper tier teams no matter what. Like Cleveland, Celtics, the Boston, even the Knicks, those teams are pretty much untouchable as far as creeping up in the standings. There's a very, very slight chance that the Magic could get into the top 4, but I'm not expecting it. There'd have to be a lot of things go wrong for the Bucks, Pacers, and Pistons, and a lot of things go right for the Magic, and that just seems like unrealistic. So my hope is that the Magic can creep up above 7th, get in that 6th race. Maybe we can see something like a Magic versus Knicks matchup. I would love to avoid the Celtics if possible. That would be great. I wouldn't mind a Pistons matchup or a Pacers matchup or a Pistons matchup for that matter. But ultimately, I would really love to avoid the Celtics. And if the playoffs started today, the Magic would be facing the Celtics. They're a juggernaut. They are playing very well this year. Obviously, they won the championship last year. That's a team I want to avoid. So I would love to see the Magic creep up into that 6th spot versus the Knicks. If they can get into the 5th spot, they could verse the Bucks or the Pacers or the Pistons. Just one of those 3 teams, kind of depending on how it plays out. I would expect the Pistons might come back down to not down to earth. They're playing at a high level this entire year, but I would expect them maybe not to finish in the top 6, but it's possible. Cade is having a really, really good run right now. That's kind of where the Magic are in the standings. The Hawks are right behind them, 27 wins, 31 losses, and the Heat are in 9th at 26 and 30. Then it gets pretty ugly down in that 10th seed. The Bulls, 23 and 35. Yuck. That 10th seed or the 10th spot for the play-in is going to be a team that really shouldn't be there. This is where I'm like, can we go back to the original play-in rules where it was the bubble and you had to be within a certain amount of wins to the team ahead of you to even qualify for the play-in? They did that one year. Obviously, they removed it for like TV rights. They can sell these games a lot more. It wasn't sustainable to keep that, but I wish they had that rule. Yeah, so that's kind of where the Magic stand right now. We'll get into the schedule in a little bit, but before we get into the schedule, I want to talk about some of the players on the team. Jalen Suggs, he's been out for about 4 weeks now with the new injury, which is the quad contusion, and it's really discouraging just with how the Magic have operated covering this injury, right? The Magic, they pretty much from game 1 that he started missing, they started listing him as questionable. I think there was even a couple of game time decisions earlier in there. And he's just been listed as questionable. And then like the day of or the day before he gets ruled out. And it's never been just out for a period of time. And it's been very frustrating because the way they initially started talking about the injury, it makes you think that it was just like a minor contusion. Contusion's like a bruise, essentially, something that you'd recover from in a week or so. But it's clearly a more severe, deeper leg contusion. I'm not a doctor by any means, so if you're a doctor listening to this, feel free to correct me. But I've done a decent amount of research online, just kind of reading up on this injury. And it does say that deeper, more severe contusions in the quad can take 4, 6, sometimes even 8 weeks to recover from and get back to action in your sport. We're clearly dealing with a more severe leg contusion. He hasn't even gone through a full contact practice. If he had, he'd be playing by now. They had a couple of practices shortly after All-Star break, and I think he did a little bit of contact, like maybe some limited contact, but it was mostly the non-contact participation that he played in or practiced in during those practices that they've had. So I'm hoping that he'll get into some contact in the next practice in the next week, and we can see him back to action in the next week or two. Until he goes through a practice with contact, I don't expect him to be in a game. I don't think he's magically going to play tomorrow or today whenever you're watching this versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, on that Tuesday game. I don't expect it until he gets cleared with contact, and that's probably not going to happen until the next practice. The good thing is they have a lot of home games coming up, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him to get that contact in, but we'll see what happens. Paulo, he's starting to play a little bit better. He's finding himself a little bit more. It looked like he and the rest of the team were still in Cancun that first quarter in the first game back after All-Star break, but then they all kind of turned it up in that second, third, and fourth quarter and really started playing a lot better basketball. And, he's still figuring things out. He's still I think it's going to be really next year. Philip Rossman Wright on Orlando Magic Daily was talking about this. He thinks it's really going to be like get him a full off season, get him, to get back into some regular training, and he'll come back next year looking like the Paulo we all know. But he is playing better than he was earlier when he first came back from injury, which I am very excited about. He's still got some efficiency stuff that he's dealing with. Part of that is, this team's offense is just kind of a mess. I kind of talked about that on one of my previous podcasts recently. I don't love how things have been run recently offensively. They're still not hitting shots from three very well. But the thing that gets me a lot with Paulo is the mid-range game. I love that he has a mid-range game. I think it's going to be an awesome tool in his bag, but he's got to get a little bit better at knowing when to pass out of a double team, because when he gets the ball and he's in the mid, he's going to get double teamed. It wouldn't matter if there was a point guard on the roster or not. If the ball's in his hands, he's going to get double teamed, particularly once he crosses over that 3-point line. And I want to see him make better reads with the ball in his hands. There's oftentimes he gets double teamed. There's guys open on the 3-point line, and he's not getting the passes to them. There's times there's someone cutting like a Wendell Carter Jr., cutting past a defender who's closing in on Paulo. He's missing easy dumps to him. There's little things like that that can be cleaned up, will be cleaned up. But right now, it's kind of what's forcing him into some of these poorly executed, heavily contested mid-range shots, where the problem with that is he's not going to pull a lot of contact in the mid-range. He gets his contact and gets to the free throw line when he's driving to the basket, and he's still doing that a good amount. But I want to see him be a better decision maker with the ball in his hands. He's a good and gifted passer. He can pass. He's 6'10", and he's got very good passing abilities. And he will get better at these things, but this is something me and some of my friends have been talking about recently that we want to see him improve on, and there's a good little stretch for him to do that. But overall, he's playing better. He's starting to make bigger shots. He's starting to just find himself a bit more and be a little bit more of a consistent scorer for this Magic team. And, playmaker as well. He's still getting 4, 5, 6 assists a game, which are awesome. He's still getting, 7 or 8 rebounds a game. He is playing well. I don't want this to be like I'm hating on Paulo, but I want to see him clean up some of that mid-range playmaking and scoring decision making that he is still struggling with, in my opinion. And that might be something that cleans up next year, but something I've been noticing recently with his recent play. All right, so let's get into the upcoming schedule. All right, there's 23 games left. So far through February, there's still a few more games left of the month, but so far through February, they've played 10 games. They're 500 through those games. They have 5 wins, 5 losses. The good thing is they've won 3 out of their last 4. So they're starting to figure things out. Granted, one of those wins was against the Washington Wizards, one of the worst teams in the league, but still a good sign that they're starting to get these wins again, because they put themselves in a hole a while ago and they're starting to slowly crawl out of it again. Before we dive in visually to the schedule, I'll just talk about some of the stats that are coming up. They have 3 back-to-backs left. Other than that, it's not super heavy on the back-to-backs. They have 3 left. They have 12 games left against teams that are 500 or better, above 500. And then they have 11 games left versus teams that are 500 or worse. So 12 games Some of those teams are double. I think they play the Cavs two more times. 12 games left with above 500 teams, 11 games left with 500 teams or worse. 10 games left versus Western Conference teams, 13 games left versus Eastern Conference teams. 5 games left of the current homestand before they go on their trip. And there's 12 games left at the Kia Center total for the rest of the season. And their longest road trip is what comes up directly after this homestand. They go on a 5-game road trip. Then it's a bunch of one-off road trips, and I think they do have a couple 2-game road trips towards the end of the season. Those last 10 games or so, there's a couple 2-game road trips, but we'll get into all that here shortly. All right, so now let's look at the remaining strength of schedule. I use Tankathon for this. There's a couple other tools that you can use, but I particularly like to use Tankathon. So the higher you are in the rankings, like number 1, that means you have a much harder strength of schedule. If you come down towards the end, that means you have a bottom, like an easier strength of schedule. So the Magic are sitting at 21. They have a top 10 easiest remaining strength of schedule, if that makes sense. Over here, you can see they play the Cavs twice. They play the Celtics again. They play the Lakers. They play the Rockets twice. They play the Bucks and the Pacers. Those are some of the harder opponents that they have listed out there. And then on the easier side, they're going to play the Wizards 2 more times. They're going to play the Pelicans, the Hornets, the Bulls, and the Spurs 1 more time. And then they'll play the Raptors 2 more times. So this is like just a fun tool. It can change kind of drastically every few days. But right now, this is kind of what's happening with the remaining strength of schedule. I expect the Magic to kind of be in this bottom tier of easier remaining strength of schedule. Some people say it doesn't matter. I kind of think it does, like particularly where the Magic are right now. They need all the easy wins they can get. So I'm loving looking at this right side where it says they're playing the Wizards twice, the Pelicans, they got the Raptors twice. Those teams are the teams that the Magic have to start getting some wins on. They did a great job of it during the last game versus the Washington Wizards. Again, and they will see them 2 more times. So that's something I'm really psyched on right now, is just kind of the Magic's remaining strength of schedule. Now let's go ahead and check out what the schedule actually looks like. And we'll kind of take this like week by week, month by month with the remaining, with the season coming up. Here's what we got going on. All right. So tomorrow or today, February 25th, they have their last true nationally televised game versus the Cleveland Cavaliers at Kia Center. This is part of the big homestand that they are in right now. This is a little bit of a hard. This is going to get hard here in a second, but they have Cleveland. Then on Thursday they have Golden State. And that wraps up February. The last 2 games are a little bit harder. Golden State is starting to roll really well with Jimmy Butler. He seems like a really, really nice fit with that team. And Steph's starting to cook. They're playing good basketball right now. Obviously, the Cleveland, they have one of the best records in the East or in the entire league right now, so they're going to be challenging too. Then it starts to back off a little bit. There's a little bit of ease there to start March. March, they play Toronto, not back-to-back, but 2 games in a row. March 2nd and March 4th, both home games at Kia Center. Those games are always interesting when it's the same team twice, because it gives the Magic and the opponent an opportunity to make adjustments going into that second game. And it's kind of like a little mini playoff adjustment period, right? Some coaches really use it to make strong adjustments. Other coaches use it to just, let's run our systems and we'll make playoff adjustments closer to the playoffs. But I always think this is an opportunity to see how a team plays, see what happens the first game, and then make an adjustment the second game. I want the Magic to win both those games, but that is an opportunity for this team to learn and grow. Then the very last game of the homestand is the Chicago Bulls. Vucci Man, Josh Giddey, those guys are going to come in again. That's not a team I'm really scared of. So these next, the start of March, a little bit of an easy schedule. Then it's going to get a little bit harder. They go on this big 5-game road trip, okay? They start off the road trip March 8th, Saturday, versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Then they head over to Houston to play the Rockets. Both of those teams are above 500. Then it gets a little easier. They cruise over to New Orleans and then back out to Minnesota and then finish it off in Cleveland. It's kind of a weird travel path, in my opinion. That Houston to New Orleans to Minnesota doesn't seem the most streamlined to me, but it is what it is. Thankfully, there's no back-to-backs during that road trip, which is nice for the Magic. They do have an NBA TV game, the Cleveland Cavaliers on March 16th. That'll be nice. But other than that, that road trip that's going to be a hard little gauntlet for them. And it's not going to get much easier because they come home for a single game versus the Houston Rockets on March 19th. And then they go back on the road for a quick game up to Washington to see the Wizards. So March it's kind of a mixed bag. They go from being home for a really long period in February to then being on the road for a very long time in March. That's the 8th through the 16th. That's a good amount of time to be on the road right now. So after Houston, it's going to lighten up a little bit again. They have Washington on the road. The Lakers come to town. That's going to be a harder game. Again, a team that's above 500. They just traded for Luka. That's a team with playoff aspirations. Then it's going to transition a little bit. And this is where the schedule, there's no more really heavy blocks. It kind of is like, is this an easy team or a below 500 team, or is this an above 500 team? They've faced Charlotte Hornets and the injured Dallas Mavericks right now to kind of wrap up March. Oh, and the Sacramento Kings too. And that's kind of like, it starts to get a little bit easier there. Charlotte, Dallas, Sacramento, none of those teams really scare me too much currently. Then you have the Clippers on March 31st. And then your first back-to-back right in here, the San Antonio Spurs road trip. That's annoying. Having a home game versus a Los Angeles Clippers, then having to go on the road for a back-to-back for the San Antonio Spurs. I guess it's better than being on the road for a back-to-back, like 2 games on the road for a back-to-back, but that's a little frustrating. And then they have a little bit of a break there. The 3rd through the 8th, they'll probably get a practice in there, but then they have 2 games at home. This is the last 4 games, Atlanta, Boston. Then they finish out the season with Indiana on the road and Atlanta on the road. So let's kind of dial this back. I just threw a ton of information at you. I just rambled on a lot. If we round out February, they have 2 more games, Cleveland and Golden State. They win one of those games. They win Cleveland tomorrow. They're back at 500. They win both of those. They're a game above 500. March, 1, 2, 3 home games before they go on a 5-game road trip. During that 5-game road trip, there is a road back-to-back. I misspoke earlier. The game between New Orleans Pelicans and Minnesota Timberwolves, that is a back-to-back on the 13th and 14th. Then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more home games. So that's kind of the last little good stretch of home games for the Magic. There's a 3-game homestand there with Dallas, Sacramento, LA, the Clippers. And then obviously, if you guys want to go see LeBron James, you can see him on the 24th. And that kind of wraps up March. April, again, we're looking at this a little bit more holistically. They have 6 games in April. 4 of them are on the road. 2 of them are at home. It goes 2 road games, 2 home games, 2 road games. San Antonio Spurs and Washington on the road. At home for Atlanta and Boston. There's a back-to-back in there. And then Indiana Pacers and Atlanta Hawks. So a couple games that are really, in my opinion, important for the Magic to make sure they win on this stretch. They gotta get these Atlanta and Indiana Pacer games. Those are going to be really big games for the Magic for the seeding. It's going to be tight. I don't expect the seeding to be any easier. I think it's going to be a race to the end. Every game's going to matter. And those last 4 games, 3 of them are against people they're going to be in the seeding races with. So I really want to see them get those wins. A couple teams I want to see them really like just show ownership over, the Raptors. You can't be losing to the Raptors right now. You also can't be losing to the Pelicans right now. And you can't lose to the Washington Wizards, who they'll see 2 more times. The Spurs, they don't have Wemby for the rest of the year, but they still have De'Aaron Fox and some other really good players like Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes. They're still a good team in general. They're not a team you can sleep on as a team. Dallas, who knows what's up with them? Maybe Anthony Davis will be back by then. That's a team that still probably wants to make the playoffs right now and show that their trade for Anthony Davis, removing Luka from the situation, was a good decision. I don't think it was, but that's something that they are looking at right there. Houston, those games are going to be tough. That team, they've had a pretty good season. Recently they haven't had Fred VanVleet recently, and they've had some slippage there, but overall, that's still a good young up and coming team. When the league is talked about for young teams on the rise, that is a team that is mentioned often. And that's a team I just would like to beat personally, because I always want the Magic to beat other young upcoming teams. And yeah, beat the Rockets. You play them twice. They haven't played them at all this season, so they're going to get their first taste with Houston this in March. And one of them is a road game, one of them is a home game. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So that's kind of the breakdown right now. Again, 23 games left of the season. You have an opportunity to rise in the standings a little bit and kind of hopefully get out of that 7th spot, avoid the Boston Celtics at all costs by going up in the standings. Going down in the standings doesn't help, because that would just make them play the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that team is a juggernaut right now. I would love to verse the Knicks. We have more size than them. We have, in theory, more bench depth than they do. The Bucks, that's a team that is good. They have Giannis, but they don't have Chris Middleton anymore. They have Kyle Kuzma. There's still some questions around that team. I don't necessarily want to verse them either, but if that's who, I'd still rather see them in the playoffs than I would see like the Boston Celtics or someone like that. So, all right, I admit I'm really tired. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I just traveled back home from the East Coast today. It's been a very long day. I'm going to let you all run. I'll see you next week. We'll get a guest back on the show. We'll deep dive more about the Orlando Magic, and we'll see where this team stands at that point. But this is your schedule breakdown, some key games to look at, and just kind of where the Magic are at right now. Let's go Magic. Tune into Orlando Magic HQ. Peace.